Today, we start the second of 18 Parvas in Mahabharata. This is called the Sabha Parva. The Khandava Vana has been burned down. There are very few survivors. One of them is Mayasura. He is considered equivalent to Vishwakarma, but for Daityas. Now he offers Arjuna and Krishna some help. He expresses gratitude for saving him and says, I want to do something for you. Arjuna says, I have everything, I don't really need anything. Go talk to Krishna, maybe he may need your help. Krishna says, I do need your help, but not for myself. I want you to build a palace for the Pandavas in Khandava Prastha. And I want you to build a palace unlike anything that has been ever seen on this earth. Mayasura says, I need to fetch material from afar, gemstones and jewels and building material that is not available where you are. Give me some time, I'll go fetch them and build the palace of your dreams. And while that was happening, Krishna stayed there for a while and spent time with the Pandavas. Eventually, he left for Dwaraka. Now Maya, the Asura architect, takes 14 months to build this palace. And once the palace is done and Pandavas have settled in it, one day Narada comes. Narada asks the kind of questions that are expected to be asked to a king. This is a long list of questions. Of the hundreds of questions Narada asks Yudhisthira, I want to share one which I found very interesting. He asks King Yudhisthira if he has banished the 6 evils. The 6 evils are sleep, idleness, fear, anger, weakness of mind, and procrastination. These are evils for a king and to a large extent evils for all of us as well. When Yudhishthira has answered satisfactorily all the questions that Narada had asked him, he asks Narada in return, have you seen a palace like this ever? You who travel with the speed of your mind in all the 3 worlds, you should have seen something like this, but have you seen something like this in the mortal realm? Narada says, not on the earth, but I'll describe to you some palaces of the gods. I have seen the palaces of Yama, Varuna, Indra, Kubera and Brahma. And he goes on to describe in detail the size, the scope, the beauty and the greatness of these 5 palaces. And as he finishes describing the palace of Brahma, he gives a list of all the people who live there. Narada mentions the names of sages and Gandharvas and gods and other celestial beings who live in the palace of Brahma, but he names only one human being, and that is Harishchandra. So obviously they are intrigued and out of curiosity ask Narada, why did you name only one human being? Who is this Harishchandra? And Narada goes on to then describe Harishchandra's story on how he attained greatness, which is obviously a story for another day. While he departs, Narada says, I want you to perform the Rajasuya Yajna because you are capable of performing it. You are a king of greatness who has achieved so much in so little time. But Narada also warns him, should you do it, there is a possibility a large-scale war may ensue, which might end up creating the destruction of this very earth. The idea being, a Rajasuya Yajna is when one king conquers all the other kingdoms and brings them under his suzerainty, and chances are some kings will not obviously like it and would want to attack him, and that leads to a chain reaction leading to a large war. Therefore, Yudhishthira is very concerned. While he wants to listen to what Narada has said, he also consults all his counselors and advisors, and they give him advice that he should stop deliberating on the consequences of the Rajasuya Yajna and perform it. Unsatisfied, Yudhishthira asks Dvaipayana, which is Vedavyasa, and Dhaumya, their family priest, about their opinion, and they too concur that he should indeed perform the yajna. He then goes on to ask his brothers, And Bhima says yes, and Arjuna says yes, but Yudhishthira is still unconvinced. He sends a swift messenger to Dwaraka to summon Krishna back to Khandava and says, I want your opinion, O Krishna. Finally, Krishna also agrees that a Rajasuya Yajna can be performed and should be by Yudhishthira. But he warns him that if you want to take up this, you need to do something else before that. And then he talks about Jarasandha. Jarasandha, the king who has to be killed before any of this can be undertaken. This Jarasandha's general is Shishupala, and he also gets support from Dantavakra, two major kings. Jarasandha has imprisoned many kings who need to be set free before a Rajasuya Yajna can be taken over. Finally convinced, when Yudhishthira says, I want to do it, he's still afraid of one thing. How will we get rid of Jarasandha? Direct frontal attack is impossible because Jarasandha has a large army. Then Bhima suggests that with Arjuna and Krishna, he would go challenge Jarasandha to a Malla Yuddha and defeat him. Yudhishthira is still unconvinced. He is afraid that he is pushing his brothers into mortal danger, but Krishna convinces that that is the right way to go. Bhima, Arjuna and Krishna will eventually travel to Magadha, the kingdom of Jarasandha, and then defeat him. Or will they? That's a story for another day. King Brihadratha had 2 wives, but he had no children. One day, he went and prayed to a saint who went into a yogic mudra, meditated under a mango tree, and eventually offered a boon to the king. This was a mango that fell into his lap, one that did not have a hole and was untouched by worms or birds. He said, give it to your wife and you will have a child. Now Brihadratha had 2 wives who cut the mango into 2 pieces and ate them. As the sage had promised, one child was born, except it was born half to one wife and half to the other. There was life in that body, but each half only had 1 eye, 1 ear, half a mouth, half a stomach and half a buttock, 1 leg and 1 hand also. Now, so scared were the wives of Brihadratha that they asked the midwives to wrap the 2 pieces of body in cloth and throw it away in garbage. As luck would have it, a Rakshasi named Jara walked by, smelled the 2 bodies and picked up the pieces. When she saw this was an infant, she decided it would be a good idea to join the 2 bodies together so that it was easier to carry home for her to eat. The moment she joined the 2 halves of the infant, the body became heavy as a mountain and hard as a vajra. She could no longer either carry it or have the courage to try and eat it. And when she realized that this was the baby that the king's wives had delivered, she took it and gave it to the king and said, I have lived in your kingdom happily and never starved or felt hungry for food ever. This is my way of returning something back to you. Take this child because this is your son that I have brought back to life. Because this child was united by Jara, which is Sandhi was done by Jara the Rakshasi. From that day onwards, this boy was to be known as Jarasandha, and when he grows up, he is going to terrify the kings and destroy the world until Bhima the warrior will come and challenge him to a single combat. Krishna eventually convinced Yudhishthira to let him, Arjuna and Bhima to go and kill Jarasandha. He told Yudhishthira that he had, that is Krishna had Niti, Bhima had power and Arjuna had valor. So when they reach Magadha, they are going to ask Jarasandha to choose for himself whom he is going to fight. We are all capable of defeating him, but if I know Jarasandha, his pride is going to get the better of him and he is going to challenge Bhima. That is what I want, because Bhima will fight him and eventually break him like a twig. If you trust me, then entrust Arjuna and Bhima to me, and I will safeguard them. Yudhishthira was scandalized to hear Krishna say, "If you trust me." He replies, "Of course I trust you. The moment you said you are going to take charge of this, I know Jarasandha is dead, all the kings he has imprisoned are free, and our Rajasuya is as good as done." Krishna, Arjuna, and Bhima dress as Brahmanas and leave for Magadha. There's a beautiful description of the geographies and the mountains and the rivers that they pass. But we will skip past that and we'll go to the point where Bhima and Arjuna, along with Krishna, break a mountain or a fortification that is used to block enemies and enter Magadha with power rather than through deceit from the main gate. Eventually, in the same attire, they enter the palace of Jarasandha. Jarasandha welcomes them, offers them lots of fruits and food and honey and various homage, but they refuse it. Now, Jarasandha is a bit suspicious. He says, "You are wearing garlands made of flowers that are not meant for Brahmanas. So I doubt if you are who you are trying to show. Your arms have marks of bowstrings upon them. I think you are Kshatriyas. I don't know who you are, and I wonder why you did not use the gate to enter the city rather than breaking down my mountain, Chaitya." Krishna responds, "The gate is for friends and welcome acquaintances. We are neither. We are your enemies." Jarasandha is confused. He says, "I don't even recognize you. How are you my enemies?" Krishna says, "You have recognized us right. We are kings dressed as Brahmanas, and you have decided to capture, imprison, and eventually sacrifice kings to God Rudra. And since we are kings, one day that may be our fate also, and you present a danger to us. We have come to preemptively fight you and safeguard ourselves and our kingdoms." So Krishna gives Jarasandha three choices. You can either fight army against army, we will go and get ours, or you could fight all of us together, or pick any one of us and fight whomever you desire. We are all ready, willing, and capable to fight with you. And as Krishna had suspected, pride gets the better of Jarasandha. He says, "I will fight the strongest of you, this Bhimasena." So on the first day of the Kartika month, the fight begins. And it goes on for 13 days. Day and night they fight. And on the 14th day, finally, Jarasandha starts showing signs of tiredness. Krishna says something as if to no one, but is directed at Bhima, that one should not press and fight an enemy when he is tired. Because if he is tired and you lift him up and turn him around and smash him, chances are you will kill him. And therefore, you should never fight a tired enemy and do adharma. Bhima understands this. And on the 14th day, as the king Jarasandha is showing signs of tiredness, he picks him up, whirls him around 100 times, and then smashes his back upon his knees. They say the sound that came out of this back-breaking effort was such that people in the city and the kings in the dungeons wondered if the Himalaya mountain itself was broken into two. They wondered if an earthquake was caused and if the earth had sunk into Patala. Jarasandha dies. The biggest potential enemy of the Rajasuya Yajna is now defeated. Triumphant, Krishna, Arjuna, and Bhima return back to Khandavaprastha. Everyone rejoices in their return, and they now know that they are ready to perform the Rajasuya Yajna with no big hindrance to their sacrifice. So now we learn two things in this. For the first time, we are seeing how carefully Krishna finds loopholes in accepted dharmic way of fighting. We will see this much more when the war begins, but this is the first sign of it. Because it is considered not correct dharma to speak to two people who are involved in a fight amongst each other, Krishna says, don't do something, but he means do it. Bhima catches it. We will see again and again Krishna employing this technique with Bhima, Bhima immediately understanding what Krishna means. And while we are usually used to the Krishna and Arjuna bonding and how they understood each other implicitly, we will know that there is a bond that exists between these two warriors as well, even though their friendship is not as close as Krishna's and Arjuna's. Point number 2 is that Jarasandha is Krishna's mortal enemy. He happens to be the father-in-law of Kamsa, who is Krishna's uncle that he killed in Mathura. Kamsa was married to Asti and Prapti, the two daughters of Jarasandha, and when they were widowed because of a young Krishna killing his uncle Kamsa, Jarasandha got angry and he kept attacking Mathura over and over again. 17 times he attacked Mathura, 17 times he was routed, but he had an army so big that he could afford casualties. Krishna, on the other hand, did not want his innocent dwellers of his city to die. Therefore, a decision was made by Krishna in consideration with other Yadavas in which they all vacated Mathura and overnight fled to Dwarka and settled there. The enmity was not over, and Krishna knew that this would spill over and cause problems for Pandavas because he was now close friends with them. So, in eliminating Jarasandha, Krishna achieves two things. One, he finally gets rid of his biggest enemy, and two, he removes a potential thorn in the path of Pandava's success as well. Yudhisthira is now all set to perform the Rajasuya Yajna. Now, this is a yajna or a sacrifice that is not to be taken lightly because only once in a generation does a king find himself deserving enough to perform it. So, based on Narada's advice, when they had gotten ready for this, Vyasa now comes and says, after the elimination of Jarasandha, you are finally ready, but you still need a lot of money. You need a lot of tributes to be collected from multiple kings from across the world. It serves two purposes. One, if they are willingly giving you the tribute, that means they are ready to work with you to crown you and accept you as the Chakravarti Samrat or the emperor. However, if they are not willing to give you money happily, what you have to do now is to go and conquer them and collect the money or tribute by force. Vyasa suggests a strategy. He says, let the four brothers other than the king go in four directions and win everyone who comes in that direction. This is the so-called Digvijaya Parva, in which Arjuna goes to the north direction. This is where fewer human kings live and many more celestial beings and gods are stationed. Arjuna is uniquely qualified to perform this act of conquest. Now, Bhima is to be sent to the east to conquer all the kings on that side, Sahadeva to the south, and Nakula to west. An interesting thing that happens is that Arjuna is on his way defeating kings and gods and Gandharvas and everyone, and when he reaches Bhagadatta, Bhagadatta says, while I can fight and probably defeat you, I would rather that a friendly relationship is maintained between you and me, and therefore you tell me what you want and I'll contribute that much to you. Another interesting thing that happens to Sahadeva is that he ends up getting into a fight with Agni, the god of fire. Long story, which will not be recited here, but it's an interesting incident that happens during the Digvijaya. Now, eventually, the four brothers, Arjuna, Bhima, Nakula, and Sahadeva, all win the directions, collect a ton of tribute. Some kings have given it happily, some have given it with a little bit of anger, the others have fought and lost and therefore have given it. One way or the other, they've conquered everyone and brought back a ton of tributes. Now, Yudhishthira is all set to perform the Rajasuya Yajna. He brings in the best Brahmanas from all around, the people who have experience in creating 6 fires to perform the Rajasuya Yajna. Remember, this is a yajna that is not performed more than once a century or so. So, very few people are actually experienced in doing it. With the setup for the yajna ready, all the kings, whether they were conquered or were willing to accept Yudhishthira as the emperor in a friendly manner, they are all sent invitations, and when they come, they bring in more gifts and more tributes and even more contributions to the effort of the war. The 6 fires that are lit to perform this yajna are called Arambhaniya, Kshatra, Dhriti, Vyushti, Dviratra, Dashapeya. Kings from all around the world are excited. The yajna goes perfectly well. And once the yajna is done, they had to identify one person who was deserving of what is called the first honor or the Pratham Samman. Obviously, Bhishma is chosen because he is the eldest and the most important person in the Kuru dynasty at the moment. He is to receive the phala or the fruits of this yajna. But when Bhishma is offered it, instead, he says that one even more deserving than me exists, and that is Krishna. Now, a lot of people obviously welcome this because Krishna is well respected in many places. However, a group of kings led by one specific person feel a bit insulted. A cowherd being treated as bigger than Bhishma? This was not acceptable. So they conspire together to insult and demean both Krishna and Yudhishthira. What happens next? That's a story for another day. Okay, so when a Rajasuya Yajna is performed, people have to bring 1,000 of something. 1,000 of anything, actually. Depending on how rich you are, depending on how willing you are, depending on how much you respect the sovereignty or the suzerainty of the to-be emperor, you are supposed to bring 1,000. A sahastra is what makes it a tribute. Now, you could bring cows, you could bring sacks of grains, you could bring horses, you could bring elephants, you could bring gold, gold coins, you could bring servants who will be part of the new king's household. You could bring chariots. You could bring chariots that had 4 horses on them, or you could bring those which had 8 horses on them. You could bring chariots that had horses which had gold necklaces in their neck and the reins made of silver. You could bring swords or arrows or bows or maces or many other kinds of weapons like javelins. You could bring silk. You could gift artisans, the people who will work to create even more things for the king. You could bring pots of ghee to contribute to the actual yajna. You could bring firewood. You could bring fire itself. The point was, it does not matter what you bring. You bring 1,000 of them. The Rajasuya has come to its end. Bhishma announces that now we need to start making offerings to all those who have participated in it, and we need to pick who is going to be the first one. Typically, it is given to either the guru, the priest, a snataka, or a king. But Bhishma advises Yudhishthira, since Krishna is here, there is none more deserving of this first offering than he is. Most people smile and accept this decision, but Shishupala, who happens to be Krishna's aunt's son or his nephew, he has a problem. Now, see, you have to understand that Shishupala has always had a problem with Krishna, and because he was the general of Jarasandha, who has just been recently killed, he is also harboring a lot of ill will towards Krishna. He doesn't like this one bit. He questions Yudhishthira and asks, when Drona is present, how is Krishna your guru? When Dhaumya is present, how is he your priest? This Krishna has not even finished his education. How is he a Snataka? And he, everybody knows, is not a king, he's just a politician. The fact that you are choosing Krishna when more eligible kings are here, it feels like an insult to me and everybody else. And saying this, Shishupala, along with a bunch of other kings, starts to leave the Sabha. Now Yudhishthira runs after him and tries to convince him and says, what you have said is not fair. You have insulted my esteemed guest in my own palace, and you have to understand that he is deserving of this, but I don't want you to walk away either. Please come back. Let's finish this properly. Then Bhishma says to Yudhishthira that this is old enmity, and Yudhishthira should not bother trying to fix it. And then Sahadeva, the brother, also chips in and says, if you have a problem, you can leave. We have chosen whom we are going to honor first. Yudhishthira then says, but all these kings seem to be bunching together. What if they start creating mischief? What if a fight breaks out and they end up harming Krishna because that is whom they are angry with? Bhishma laughs and says, can a lion be killed by a dog? You think Krishna is unsafe because Shishupala wants to hurt him? And he laughs. Now, Shishupala can't take this. This was said loudly for everyone to hear, and Shishupala responds by saying, you, Bhishma, you are a eunuch who has not married a girl because you do not have manhood. And you talk about Krishna like he has achieved something great. What is great in killing a Putana, a Rakshasi who had become a vulture? What is so special about killing Keshi or Arishta, Asuras who came in the form of horses or bulls, because they were not trained in warfare? What is so great in breaking a toy named Shakata? What is so great in lifting Govardhana Parvata and holding it up for 7 days? It is as big as an anthill and no bigger. And Kamsa, you think killing Kamsa is great? This is the worst kind of betrayal anyone can do, because all his life, Krishna has eaten food that came from Kamsa's palace, and then to turn around and kill his own uncle? This is the behavior of someone who is a cowherd, does not understand Kshatriya Dharma, and is no king. He is responsible also of Gohatya because he has killed Arishta. He is responsible for Stri Hatya because he has killed Putana, and he is also a coward who ran away when Jarasandha attacked him and could only kill Jarasandha by taking the help of Bhishma. Shishupala goes on and says much worse things about Krishna. Bhima is angry, but Bhishma pacifies him. He says, you don't have to get angry on behalf of Krishna. He will take care of this. In fact, I wonder if this is Krishna's plan because Shishupala's time has come. Shishupala listens to what Bhishma says and retorts, it looks to me, Bhishma, that you are a Suta who's paid to praise people. So if you're going to praise someone, Praise Jarasandha, the greatest king who ever lived. Praise Karna, who, in spite of so many problems, has achieved such greatness. Praise Drona, praise Ashwatthama, praise Shalya, who is Yudhishthira's own uncle and is the most intelligent person that we know of. Praise Duryodhana, who has managed to control one of the most powerful kingdoms of this time all alone. And since you will not praise any of these and you will only praise Krishna, I want to believe that you and the Pandavas are showing favoritism and choosing someone who's not deserving of this honor. This, and because Krishna is still keeping calm and not even getting up from his seat in spite of these many insults, Shishupala finally turns and faces Krishna. And he says, if you dare, then fight me here. I'll kill you first, Krishna, and then I'm going to kill Yudhishthira because he has insulted all of us. Krishna softly responds and says, Shishupala, I've grown up watching you go from bad to worse. The only reason you are still alive is that I have given my word to your mother, who's my aunt, that I will not hurt you. But you seem to have caused all lines today. And Krishna turns to everybody else in the Sabha and says, don't think I have a problem with Shishupala because he is insulting me personally. It is because he has also done a lot of adharmic things. His time has come to pay the price for all the misdeeds he has committed. Shishupala laughs at him and he says, you stole my would-be wife. Rukmini was supposed to marry me, and like a thief, you stole my woman away from me. If only I was alive. But this sentence is cut midway because Krishna has had enough. Krishna summons his Sudarshana Chakra and in one shot beheads and kills Shishupala. The whole Sabha is paralyzed in fear and in respect towards what Krishna has done. Shishupala, when his head is cut off and falls to the ground, a bright light, similar to the brightness of the sun, leaves his body and enters into Krishna and then disappears. Krishna tells Yudhishthira, perform the funeral rites for this king of Chedi and crowns Shishupala's son to become the next king of Chedi kingdom. The yajna is now over. Shishupala is dead and everybody receives their offerings and leaves for their respective countries. Two people decide to stay back in Khandavaprastha, Duryodhana and Shakuni. And that becomes the biggest turning point in the history of Mahabharata because what happens here is going to change the very direction of this story. A lot of times the story of Shishupala Vadha is shown in Mahabharata to be a very small part of it because Krishna stories are not told in detail in Mahabharata. Shishupala is a legendary character who has been one of the enemies of the reincarnations of Vishnu for the longest time. In the Dwapara Yuga, in the Krishna reincarnation, him along with Dantavakra are the two people who are similar to Ravana and Kumbhakarna or Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. And there is this long story of Vishnu and his two enemies. That's a story for another day. But today, let's talk about a Mahakavya called Shishupala Vadham. This Mahakavya, Sanskrit Mahakavya, and one of these days I hope to make a full video series about it. It talks about a different ending to this story. Shishupala, in that, does not die in the Sabha itself when he angrily walks away from the Sabha and is brought back by Yudhishthira in the Vyasa story that we are listening now. The story as written by that Mahakavi changes because Shishupala leaves and goes back to Chedi. The Rajasuya Yagna is complete here, and then a full scale attack is launched, and Krishna, in war, eventually ends up killing Shishupala. A lot of people feel that a legendary character who's been haunting Vishnu avatars for the longest time, it felt like he got a very easy death and was not fully deserving of it. Uh, Shishupala Vadha, when I do it, I will link it somewhere. You will understand how this story goes and how it goes into the details of the death of Shishupala. When the Rajasuya Yagna was complete and everybody had left, and only Duryodhana and Shakuni had decided to stay back for a while, a strange concern started troubling Yudhishthira. So just before Krishna Dvaipayana Veda Vyasa had left, Yudhishthira confronted him and in front of all his brothers asked him a question. He asked him, when Shishupala died, in the midst of all the strife that happened during the yagna, and Krishna was responsible for killing him, a lot of kings looked uncomfortable, some looked angry, some looked ready to seek vengeance. What consequences will this death have on us and the world? He asked Vyasa. And Vyasa replied, this has the potential to destroy the entire Kshatriya race. A regular Rajasuya that gets done without a lot of event and fanfare is already enough to cause fight among kings, but this has created two groups now, and I am worried that when something of this scale happens, it takes 13 years for its impact to be felt in the world. So for 13 years, somehow, the world will remain peaceful, and one day you will become the center because of which the entire world will come together and the Kshatriya race will be eliminated, creating orphans and widows for as far as the eye can see. And when Yudhishthira finds out his destiny, he knows that he has performed not just the Rajasuya Yagna, but also the biggest mistake of his life. He says, I am ready to die. I don't deserve to live if I am going to be responsible for so much death and destruction. Arjuna convinces him that that is not the right way to go. And somehow good sense prevails and Yudhishthira decides to live on. Now, Duryodhana and Shakuni, who have been living in this amazing palace of the Pandavas, are finding themselves somewhat disillusioned by the power, the beauty, and the greatness that the Pandavas are spreading across. This palace is a palace full of illusions, and everywhere the eye can see, the usage of a crystal form of alum, Sphatika has created such wondrous sights that Duryodhana is stumbling and fumbling and making a fool of himself at every step of the way. One time, he thought there was water based on the shine from the alum stone and picked his clothes up so that they don't get wet. Turned out it was dry land. Another time, he mistook real water for alum and fell into it and wet his whole body and his new clothes. Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva, and many servants laughed at this. Now, for a normal person, this would look like a simple jest to a minor tragedy. Except the state of mind that Duryodhana was in, it felt like this was insult of the highest order targeted at him. As he continued moving around the palace, one time he banged into a wall thinking there was none. Another time he tried to push a door that turned out to not be a door and fell through it again. Overall, he made a big fool of himself an entire day and was frequently laughed at. The most important point here, though, is that Duryodhana is jealous. He's jealous of the riches that the Pandavas have collected even after being banished and sent to a barren land. He complains to Shakuni and says, after seeing this much success of my enemies, I can't live anymore and I am going to die. Shakuni convinces him that dying is not the answer, but also because they are so powerful now, because Yudhisthira is the emperor now with the support and promise of suzerainty by all the kings around the world, it is impossible to defeat him, even if the gods in Indraloka came together to help them. But there was one way, said Shakuni. He told Yudhishthira is very fond of gambling, but he doesn't know how to gamble. On the other hand, I am a world-renowned expert in gambling. So I have an idea. Let's go back to Hastinapura, convince your father, set up a place for gambling, and invite Yudhishthira. Let him come and join, and since he will not be able to say no, I will play on your behalf and win everything from them. In one day, you will be the master of all that the Pandavas have earned in these many years. This is music to Duryodhana's ears, and he goes back to Hastinapura and starts convincing his father Dhritarashtra to allow him to do this. In Khandava though, which is now slowly being called Indraprastha because it is as if Indraloka has come on this earth, Yudhishthira is in another predicament. While he has agreed to not die, even though he knows that he is going to be responsible for the death of millions, he has come to a conclusion that all the problems in this world are caused by the word no. So every time someone asks him anything, he just wants to say yes to it. And therefore, this eliminates the possibility of causing any disrespect or negativity in this world. Now, Shakuni does not know this, but he is going to take advantage of it all the same. When they reach back to Hastinapura, they start convincing Dhritarashtra, who immediately questions Duryodhana and says, I don't understand why you are jealous. You have everything. You are the Yuvaraja or the crown prince of my kingdom. You have learned everything from Kripacharya on Vedas and Arthashastra and Vedangas and Vedantas. You have learned Dhanurvidya from Dronacharya. You've been a student of Balarama, one of the greatest teachers of fighting with a gada. You have access to riches, you have access to power, and this kingdom is at your mercy, ready for you whenever you want to ascend the throne, and yet it looks like you are jealous of someone who has just started. Duryodhana says, you don't seem to understand, father. The riches that they have acquired in these past years, we will never be able to reach that far. And it's only a dumb king who is going to celebrate the success of an opponent. I am not a dumb king. And before you know it, the Pandavas will come and attack us. Duryodhana then goes on to describe in detail the gifts and tributes that the Pandavas have received from across the world. And then he goes on to describe about the Abhisheka which was performed and how people and sages and gods from celestials from all around the three worlds had come to perform this. And Duryodhana is basically enamored and envious of Yudhishthira's success. So he tells his father the only way to get at him is through Dyuta Krida or gambling. So we are going to build a beautiful Sabha, a court where gambling will happen. All I'm looking for is your support in sending Vidura to fetch them here. Dhritarashtra says, I am going to consult with Vidura and ask him what he says. Duryodhana will have none of it. He says, what kind of a king asks for permission from the son of a dasi? He's your servant. He's supposed to do your bidding, not give you advice. It is kings like you, father, who destroy the morale of their children and cause them to be ruined in poverty. Dhritarashtra is agitated enough and instigated by Duryodhana. He just summons Vidura and tells him, go to Indraprastha and request Yudhisthira to come and join Duryodhana in a game of gambling. And before Vidura can say anything, Dhritarashtra says, This is a command. This is not a call for consultation. With no choice, Vidura goes to Indraprastha and invites Yudhishthira. In time, Yudhishthira will come, that fateful gambling game will happen, which will spell the ruin of Bharatavarsha as we know it. But that's a story for another day. Now, one of the key stories that we are aware of is how Draupadi laughed at Duryodhana. One of the most famous lines is that when Duryodhana falls into the water thinking it is flat land, Draupadi is standing there and she laughs and she says, "The blind son of a blind father." And this enrages Duryodhana so much that he decides that he needs to take revenge upon Draupadi. Nowhere in the core Mahabharata is this story mentioned. Draupadi was not even present there and she did not laugh at Duryodhana. One of the reasons I think this is done is eventually when the Dyuta Krida or the gambling game will happen and Draupadi is summarily dragged into the court and insulted by the Kauravas, this incident acts as almost justification, right? So if Draupadi had the audacity to laugh at the king, then of course the king will want to seek revenge and insult her in front of people also. Except the people who laughed at him were his own cousins, and the situation was genuinely silly and funny that any other person would have taken it in their stride. But Duryodhana, whose mind was driven by jealousy, thought of it like an insult worthy of destroying Pandavas. So there you have it. Did Draupadi laugh at Duryodhana? No, she didn't, because she was not even there. Vidura has come to invite Yudhishthira to Hastinapura. Your father, that is, Dhritarashtra, has sent me to invite you to gamble, and I am doing my duty in inviting you, says Vidura. Yudhishthira says, I see you're uncomfortable, as if you're asking me to do something that you don't like, but you don't want to stop me from doing it. Is that correct, uncle? Asked Yudhishthira. And Vidura replied, I'm asking you for a gambling game, and I know that whenever people gamble, there are always problems, and I'm worried this is going to be no different. Yudhishthira says, but if you're inviting me to gambling, as a Kshatriya, I don't have the freedom to say no. It would be like saying no to a call for a fight. So I am honor bound to come and play. Can you tell me who all are there? Vidura gives a long list of names in which there is also Shakuni. Yudhishthira says, by choice, I don't want to play with Shakuni because I know he's a cheat and he will deceive me. But I still want to come and play. And in no time, all the Pandavas have prepared and started to leave towards Hastinapura. And even as he is leaving, Yudhishthira has the premonitions of something going wrong. He says, destiny has robbed us of our sight. It shines a bright glare in our eyes, and we are walking, I feel, towards doom. They set out, reach Hastinapura, spend the night there, wake up, and go to the Sabha, which Yudhishthira describes as crowded with rogues and cheats. Yudhishthira has a word with Duryodhana and says, I am willing to gamble, and I know every gambling game is going to have some cheating, but remember that I have acquired all this money, all this gold, all these resources so that I am able to serve my people. Don't use deceit if you can, but if you do, don't cheat me so much that you win everything that I have. Limit your winnings. Let's stop it when it still makes sense. All of this is happening before the game has even begun. Duryodhana says, Shakuni will gamble from my side. Yudhishthira says, that seems unfair. Why don't you gamble by yourself? To which Duryodhana responds, if you are afraid, well, I can let you go. You don't have to play if you're scared of playing. Now, Yudhishthira can't obviously say no because he's now been questioned. He says, that's not a problem, let's play, and they start playing. Shakuni picks up the dice and asks Yudhishthira, what do you stake? Yudhishthira replies, I have these 1,000 horses that I'm willing to stake. And Shakuni announces, I have won them. What do you stake now? Yudhishthira says, I have these 1,000 elephants. I stake them. Shakuni says, I have won them also. What else do you have now? And this goes on and on and on until Yudhishthira has lost gold and silver and servants. There is not much left to lose now. And people, onlookers who are around, it is clear that this is proceeding towards a very wrong direction. Vidura gets up and shouts at Duryodhana and says, stop this madness. Vidura warns Duryodhana and tells him, like a madman is climbing a tree to get to honey without realizing that at the end of that branch is a big well into which he will fall and die. You are being extremely greedy, Duryodhana. Stop this now. Duryodhana says, O Kshatta, O Vidura, you are a servant. Stay in your limits and shut up. Let us play the game the way we want it. Shakuni once again taunts Yudhishthira and says, if you are afraid, we can stop. If you have the courage, let's continue. And the game begins anew once more. And the losing streak of Yudhishthira continues. Yudhishthira stakes something, Shakuni says, I have won that. Yudhishthira stakes something else, Shakuni has won that too. And before you know it, he's got nothing left over. And finally, Yudhishthira does the unthinkable. He points at his brother and says, this is Nakula, the most beautiful, the most humble, the strongest, most well-behaved dharmic person there is. He is my stake now. And Shakuni announces, I have won him as well. He's going to be our slave now. The madness is fully upon Yudhishthira. He now stakes Sahadeva and loses, Arjuna and loses, Bhima and loses. And then finally, he stakes himself and says, if I lose, I will be your slave forever. Shakuni wins Yudhishthira as well. And then taunts Yudhishthira once more. I don't understand. Why, when you still had riches left in you, did you bet yourself? Yudhishthira is confused. I don't have anything else. I have lost all my kingdom, my brothers, and myself. To which Shakuni says, you have a beautiful wife in Panchali. Why not bet her? The madness has fully taken over Yudhishthira now. He says, this wife of ours, the most beautiful woman in the world, I stake her in this game. And once again, Shakuni throws his dice. The whole Dyuta Sabha watches in horror, not knowing what happened. Vidura shouts, shame. They say sounds are heard from celestial beings and gods who have descended in the firmament to watch this game, and they all shout shame at Yudhishthira and Shakuni. But Dhritarashtra, the blind king, is blinded by greed also. He is excited by this. He screams, has Shakuni won? Has he won Draupadi? But that's a story for another day. Okay, what is this game that Shakuni is playing? This has been a question of interest for readers of Mahabharata for the longest time. Was he really deceiving? Was there dice that were listening to him? There are local stories about how those dice were made out of the bones of his father and listened to his command. The critical edition of Mahabharata, or usually any edition of Mahabharata, does not get into the details of the game at all. It is believed that this gambling game was so common, that was played all around, that there was no need to explain the rules of the game. So, in spite of a lot of research, we today have no idea what that game is about at all. We don't know. Was there a board? Was this played using 2 dice, 4 dice? Was it played using cowdies? The word dice is mentioned once or twice, but that's about it. We are not even sure that the dice was used to play the game. It feels as if the dice is just around. This deeper dive does not take you any deeper, but instead leaves you in the shallow waters because nobody knows what that game is. But one thing is clear, there was definitely no throwing of dice and betting on the outcome of that throw. This was not some kind of a board game or anything at all. Basically, we don't know what the game is. All we know is that Yudhishthira lost everything and probably also his wife. Has Draupadi been won? Is she ours now? Dhritarashtra asks excitedly, and it turns out she has indeed been won. Shakuni never loses. Duryodhana orders Vidura to go fetch Draupadi so she can now live with the other servants, because how dare she live in the royal quarters. Vidura warns Duryodhana again that you're collecting the firewood for your own funeral. Don't act like a goat that digs a knife out, which will be used to slaughter the goat itself. Duryodhana is not listening anymore. He orders Pratikramin, an attendant, who then goes and tells Draupadi the message. Pratikramin tells her that in an ill-fated gambling match, your husbands have lost themselves and they have lost you too after that. And the king Duryodhana has ordered that you should appear in the Sabha and from then on go to the servants' quarters. Draupadi is surprised. This was completely unexpected. She tells the attendant to go check with Yudhishthira if he lost himself first and then her, or was she lost before Yudhishthira lost himself. And when the attendant comes and conveys this message from Draupadi, Duryodhana is angry. He says, ask her to come here herself and then ask it. The attendant goes back and tells Draupadi this message once more. She, because she is with women, is clad in a single cloth and she is on her menstrual period at that time. She is weeping when she has heard this message. The attendant dare not force her to come, so he comes back and tells Duryodhana and everybody else in the Sabha that while he understands the message, he dare not convey it to her nor force her to come here. Duryodhana is tired of this. He says this is not a job for servants. He directs Dushasana, his brother, to go and bring her to the Sabha. Without any words, Dushasana walks in and holds her by her hair and drags her into the Sabha. Along the way, he tells her that you have been lost, you are our servant now, and you do as we bid. And once in the Sabha, in this extremely difficult situation, remember being clad in one cloth and on her period, she looks around. She looks at Bhishma and Dhritarashtra and Vidura and Drona and Kripa, her own husbands, and curses all of them. But her anger is directed towards her husbands. She has been told that she lives in a society. She who has a husband has a protector. She has 5 husbands, and yet not one gets up to protect her and protect her from physical harm or from shame. And the way she looks at them, they burn in shame far worse than they had felt when they were losing their kingdom and everything along with it. Draupadi now turns to Dhritarashtra and asks him if Yudhishthira had already lost himself, could he have staked her after that? And when this question is asked and no one answers, Bhima is extremely angry. He orders Sahadeva to fetch some fire that he can set to Yudhishthira's hands and burn them down. He says, if this was not my elder brother and if he was not our Lord, I would have killed him today. Arjuna consoles him. Vikarna, a brother of Duryodhana, steps in and asks everybody in the Sabha, answer her question. She's asking if she can be staked in a game of gambling by a person who was already a slave himself. Karna steps up. He scolds Vikarna and says, she has been won by dharma. Remember, she already sleeps with 5 men. In that, she's already like a prostitute. Now, she's also a slave and still wearing royal clothes. Strip her off. Get rid of her clothes and her husband's clothes and bring them into the servant class, commands Karna. Dushasana tugs at her clothes and a new one keeps appearing every time he pulls at what she is wearing. Now, in many versions of Mahabharata, it is told how she prays to Krishna and Krishna sends her a piece of cloth. There is also mention about how Draupadi had tied a piece of cloth to Krishna's fingers when he had hurt himself, and this is Krishna's promise of returning back uh, for the help she had given him. None of that appears in the critical edition. In here, miraculously, whenever Dushasana pulls off one cloth, another appears in its place. That's all we know. But when this is happening and Draupadi is crying inconsolably, Bhima can no longer take it. He stands up and they say fire is emanating from him. He's so angry and he shouts, Dushasana, you have gone too far. One day I will tear your chest and drink your blood. Duryodhana, a little worried, but still fully confident that Dharma is on his side, tells Panchali that he will not answer her question and instead she should ask that question to her own husbands. Ask them what they think. And if they think that you are not won by Dharma, you are free to go. Bhima is angry again. He says, one day I'll kill everyone here. And I would have done it today if not for Yudhishthira being our Lord and commanding us to keep quiet. Karna says to Panchali, you are the wife of slaves and you are a slave yourself. Stop pretending like you have rights. Dushasana, take her to the servants' quarters, he commands again. Duryodhana asks the same question again to Pandavas. If you think she was lost rightfully, she's a slave. But if you think you committed an adharma in staking her, she's free to leave. And when he does that, he exposes his left thigh and pats at it while looking at Draupadi, asking her to come and sit there. Bhima has had enough. He stands up again, but when he's restrained, he makes another vow and he says, I will break that thigh with a gada. Vidura stands up once again. He tries to prevent this madness once more. He warns them again that you have gone too far. There is still time to safeguard yourself, but don't go farther. Duryodhana repeats, I will abide by what the Pandavas say. I ask all 4 of you individually, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva. You tell me if you think Yudhisthira is your lord or not. If he could bet Draupadi on behalf of all of you co-husbands, yes or no? You say yes, she's our slave. You say no, she's free to go. And nobody talks. And then suddenly they hear the sound of a jackal screaming in the forest. Then they hear donkeys responding in unison and braying. And they start hearing the sounds of terrible birds screaming everywhere. All these are considered really bad omen. And now Dhritarashtra is terrified. He gets up and stops this. He says, I am sorry, Draupadi. What has been done to you is unfair, and I want to set it right. Ask me a boon, and I will fulfill it. To which Draupadi says, I want Yudhisthira to be set free. Dhritarashtra says, I want to give you another boon. Ask one more. And Draupadi says, I now want all the other four brothers to be set free as well. In her mind, she was never a slave and does not ask to be set free. Dhritarashtra says, ask one more boon. And Draupadi now refuses. Remember, I am the queen. I can't keep taking boons from another king. You give me the freedom of my husbands, and that is all I want. But Dhritarashtra wants to set it properly right. He asks Yudhishthira to come forth, and when Yudhishthira does that, Dhritarashtra, the blind king, says, I return back to you everything that you have lost. Go back to Khandavaprastha, take all that you have lost, along with your honor and dignity. I'm sorry for what happened to you, but I hope you will forgive and forget what has been done to you. Go back without cultivating enmity for your brothers because Duryodhana got carried away. The five brothers and Panchali turn their back on the Sabha and start walking out towards Khandavaprastha. But before they are out of earshot, the devil calls once more. Let's play one last game, says Shakuni. And Yudhishthira, unbelievably, turns back and walks towards the Sabha once more. So, one unanswered question in Mahabharata throughout the story is the question, was Draupadi a slave or not? Could Yudhishthira have staked her after he had lost himself or not? Draupadi is also interested in that question. And if the answer to that was given as yes, she was ostensibly ready to be a slave. And with a slave comes the demand of doing whatever the master expects, up to and including being ready for sexual intercourse whenever the master desires it. That was the whole point that Duryodhana and Karna were making, that you are ours now, completely and entirely. And Draupadi never once wanted to ask or even thought about asking, is this behavior not wrong towards even the so called servants or slaves? It's probably a wrong question to ask, and one has to wonder about the time and the place that they were living in then. But throughout, you never have one single person questioning, is the behavior towards a slave all right? Is all the respect and humility, is all the respect due only to the royals? The point that was being made was that they treated her as if they would treat a servant, which means this was perfectly normal way to treat a servant, and that is something that we all have to be a little careful with, and to a large extent thank ourselves that the world has somewhat evolved to a point where this is not considered okay anymore. The question really is not if Draupadi was a servant or not, a slave or not, but instead, if she was one, how she would have been treated is how all the servants and slaves were being treated on a daily basis already. And that is something to be worried about. Dushasana ran to Duryodhana and informed him, Father has returned everything that the Pandavas had lost, and they're returning back to Indraprastha. Duryodhana would not have it. He had a word with Karna and Shakuni, and they came up with a plan and ran towards Dhritarashtra. They told him, do you think they are going to go in peace and forget about the insult that was meted to them? They are going to call in the favors of all the kings, bring an army, attack and destroy us. Now is the time to punish them because there is no other way to win against them now. We have gone too far. on this path. Dhritarashtra says, "You're right, and we need to bring them back." Shakuni suggests that we should call them back for another game of dice, and this time, when I defeat them, they will have nothing left, not even their self respect. Gandhari is scandalized. She says, "We have just built a dam to stop this dangerous river, and you people are talking about destroying this now? Do you realize the flood is going to destroy the entire Kuru dynasty?" To which Dhritarashtra says, "If being destroyed is our destiny, then what choice do I have? How can I stand in the way of destiny?" Yudhisthira is stopped on the way by Vidura to be told that he is being invited back into Dyuta Krida once more. Unbelievably, Yudhisthira turns back, and neither the brother nor the wife stops him. When he comes back to the Sabha, Shakuni explains the new rules. This time, we are not playing with stakes of elephants and horses and cows and slaves and brothers and wives. This time, we are staking our next 13 years. The person who wins gets the kingdom of both the people, and the person who loses goes into exile for 12 years and then has to spend another additional year in incognito. In this 13th year, if they are spotted and identified, they have to go back into exile for 12 more years and another year of incognito until the conditions are fully met. We're going to play only one game, one stake, and winner takes it all and loses leaves for exile. Everybody in the Sabha shouts, "No, don't do it." But Yudhishthira is once again back into his addiction and madness. He says yes. Shakuni picks up the dice, and in due time he announces, "I have won." Yudhishthira, his brothers, and the wife shed their upper garments, wear deer skin, and start walking towards the forest. On seeing how they look, Dushasana taunts them and says, "You used to roam around this world like you have conquered it, and look at you now. You've got nothing except the deer skin that you wear." He turns to Draupadi and tells her, one husband is enough to take care of a wife and to protect her. Look at you, you've got 5, and not one of them can stop your suffering and your insult. If you take my word, you should marry one of us. Or anyone in this Sabha, even the lowliest servant, would be a better husband for you than these 5 losers. Bhima turns and screams in anger. He warns Dushasana and tells him that on the 14th year, if you don't return our kingdom and there is a war, I am going to rip your chest apart and drink the blood from it. I am then going to kill Duryodhana. Arjuna is going to kill Karna, and Sahadeva is going to kill Shakuni. All 3 of you who have conspired against us are all going to die by our hands. Eventually, the Pandavas start to leave. Kunti comes and starts talking to her daughter-in-law and her sons. She tells Draupadi to be strong and keep her husbands united. She tells her sons to be strong and be ready for a battle that is coming up. Vidura gives another dire warning. He says, the happiness that you see now, O Duryodhana, it's only going to last as long as the shade from palm tree lasts in winter. It's here for a moment and then it will be gone, and after that will follow your destruction. What you have done today, you are going to pay the price for it, and so will the entire world. Gandhari warns once more to stop this madness. Drona advises them to stop this. But Dhritarashtra only nods his head in helplessness and says, destiny is all powerful and I can do nothing against it. I know this will not end well. I know the Pandavas have the support of Krishna and they will come back stronger than ever and avenge this. I am a helpless, blind king who is led by destiny and goes wherever fate takes him. If you've been paying attention to Dhritarashtra and his actions, you will realize that there is a pattern to this. He wants to do good. He is told by his son that The opposite of what he wants to do is the right thing for his family. He grudgingly accepts it and does it, and is then advised by Vidura to not do it. And this pattern repeats again and again and again. Dhritarashtra symbolizes the mindless greed in all of us. He is a metaphor for our uncontrolled desire. Gandhari is willful ignorance, and Vidura is the voice of conscience. Now, blind desire wants to listen to the voice of conscience, in fact, does hear it, but whenever there is an opportunity, desire defeats conscience and ends up doing what it planned to do any case. Dhritarashtra and Vidura and Gandhari, they're all in us. It is our choice whom we are going to let win.